To quickly touch base with you about grades and a reminder for the grading system, which is unusual. If we look at this example of the grade book for one student and add up all of the points, which I usually do really quickly in my head, I believe this one came up to 74 total points, which means for this person, only about 20 more points will bring the final grade to an A. And not very many people have this many points in this many items that are all in green, but it doesn't matter because points are still points. I still only add them. I don't do any other funny math with them. So even if all of yours were yellow and they were half of that total, you would still have 35 points, let's say, and I would still allow you to revise the first paper and to do better on the second paper and, to participate more in these newer discussions and then the discussions from Brown Girl Dreaming. I'm going to change the due date on this because very few people had the opportunity, and the focus of the discussions has a lot to do with the back and forth between members of the class. Not just me reading an answer, but rather you all sharing ideas with each other. So that's the first thing that I wanted to show you. The second thing I wanted to talk about, and this is actually going to be the second quiz, and it's going to be obviously somewhat different because there's not going to be right or wrong answers. It's just going to be this set of questions to think about, and I'll create a discussion where you can answer them. So first of all, for this first quiz, I want to refer you back to, I just clicked on interdisciplinary lenses from week 1, and this helpful link called What is a Social Construct? And pardon my ads popping up. This tells us that I like jewelry and clothes, government, race, gender, femininity and masculinity, illness, marriage, family, organized religions, and technology are social construct, but also deviance, questions of what is right or wrong and what is typical, and finally education. So considering the idea of what is a social construct, let's take that a little bit further and think about this question. If deviance is a social construct, then crime might be a social construct. Certainly, since government is a social construct and governments punish crimes, usually, we could make that argument about crime or about criminality, which is the act of committing crimes. The second definition here, though, a grave offense, especially against morality, I find really interesting, particularly in terms of how Kaz defines his own sense of self as a merchant rather than as a criminal. And that's something that I emphasized in the first exam. And reprehensible, foolish, or disgraceful is a less formal definition of crime, but certainly that doesn't apply to the characters in Six of Crows either. So in Fjerda, it's not a crime to call a Grisha a witch and hunt and burn them at the stake. Obviously, crime is a social construct. So those questions of right and wrong are gray areas and have to do with the way we build society. At the same time, there's criminality, the quality or state of being criminal. And there is disability. So we can entertain the question of whether disability is a social construct. For example, dyslexia, seeing things differently. Part of the reason I have dyslexia is because I don't use both of my eyes together. They're not synchronized. I look with one eye then the other, and that causes things to move around on the page. It makes it very tiring and difficult to read. But I also think it makes me see everything differently, perhaps, than others do. And let's see. One interesting point about this definition is that they say something that impairs you or limits your ability to participate in typical daily activities and interactions. I think they probably recently changed the word from normal to typical, but if we think about people who are not neurotypical, that really forces us to consider, typical versus atypical. Why are particular forms of social interaction that we call normal are better than forms of social interaction that someone who is not neurotypical, particularly someone who's on the autism spectrum? And for that reason, I like to think about whether Kaz Becker might be on the autism spectrum. For example, he wears his gloves and he doesn't like human touch because of his brother's death. But is it also because perhaps he's just highly sensory sensitive? And some of his other ways of being do suggest that he is not neurotypical, nor are Grisha. They're not typical in any kind of way. So the Fieridans would define that as a disability or as a dehumanizing characteristic, but that just makes us ask, what is a crime and what is a disability? So those are the questions that are implicit in this quiz for today. And I think that's all the important things I had to tell you.